The private jet lurched violently just minutes after takeoff over Lake Michigan, throwing passengers against their seats as warning alarms screamed through the cabin. Evan Miller, year-old single father returning home from a construction job, tightened his grip on the armrest as smoke seeped from the cockpit door. The pilot's strained voice crackled over the speaker, announcing an engine failure and an emergency water landing. Panic erupted instantly. People cried, prayed, and clutched one another as the aircraft descended rapidly toward the dark, freezing lake below. When the jet hit the water, the impact felt like a collision with concrete. The cabin flooded within seconds, icy water rushing in through shattered panels. Evan unbuckled himself and forced his way through the chaos, helping a terrified elderly man toward the emergency exit. As the plane tilted and began sinking, he noticed a woman trapped beneath a fallen seat near the front. She was unconscious, water rising around her. Evan pushed through debris, lifting the heavy seat with all his strength. He dragged her free, ignoring the burning pain in his shoulders as the cabin filled. The water was now chest-high, and visibility was fading fast. Evan wrapped his arm around the woman, guiding her toward the open door as freezing waves slammed against them. Other passengers scrambled out ahead, but Evan refused to let go. He kicked hard, pulling them both into the open lake just as the jet slipped beneath the surface. The cold stole his breath, but he kept swimming, holding her above water until rescue boats arrived moments later. Hours later, Evan sat shivering on the dock, wrapped in a thin emergency blanket. He had no idea who the woman was, only that she was alive. Paramedics rushed her into an ambulance while Evan quietly declined attention, insisting others needed help more. When asked for his name, he gave it reluctantly, then borrowed a phone to call his sister to tell her he'd survived. He never asked about the woman again. The next morning, Evan woke up on his sister's couch, sore and exhausted. His phone buzzed repeatedly, with unknown numbers he ignored. Then, outside, the sound of engines rolled down the quiet street. He looked out the window and froze. 3 black Cadillacs were parked neatly in front of the house. Men in tailored suits stepped out, scanning the neighborhood. One approached the door and knocked politely. When Evan opened it, the man smiled respectfully. "Mr. Miller," he said, "our CEO would like to see you." Confused and wary, Evan followed them to the driveway, where a woman stood waiting beside the lead car. She was 30 years old, dressed simply despite the luxury around her, her eyes steady and sincere. "I'm Claire Reynolds," she said softly. "You saved my life." Only then did Evan realize who she was. Claire Reynolds was the billionaire CEO of Reynolds Aerospace, one of the most powerful business leaders in the country. When Evan shook her hand, but she pulled him into a sudden embrace instead. "You didn't know who I was," she said quietly. "You didn't hesitate. You chose me over yourself." They sat inside the car as Claire explained what Evan never knew. She had been trapped, seconds from drowning. Doctors said she would not have survived without him. "I've built companies, signed billion-dollar deals," she said, "but none of that mattered underwater. I was just another human who needed help." Evan shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "Anyone would have done it," he said. Claire shook her head. "Most people didn't." She handed him a folder. Inside were documents for a fully paid home near his son's school, a college trust fund, and a job offer with full benefits, one that allowed flexible hours so he could be present as a father. Evan stared in disbelief. "I didn't do this for money," he said firmly. "I know," Claire replied. "That's why you deserve it." She leaned forward. "And if you say no, I'll respect it. But understand this isn't charity. It's gratitude." Tears burned Evan's eyes as he thought of his son, of the nights he worked double shifts just to stay afloat. He nodded slowly. "Then I'll accept for him." Weeks later, Evan moved into the new home, his son racing through the empty rooms with laughter echoing behind him. True to her word, Claire stayed in touch, not as a billionaire, but as a friend. Sometimes they talked about business, sometimes about parenting, and sometimes about that cold lake where two strangers' lives collided. Neither of them ever forgot that morning. Evan returned to his work with pride, never bragging about what he'd done. Claire returned to her empire with a deeper sense of purpose, and every time three black Cadillacs passed through a quiet neighborhood, they carried a reminder that courage doesn't announce itself, and heroes don't always know whose life they've saved until the next morning arrives.